22. And today I plan to discuss here left versus right heart, right? And just as a mode of disclaimer, as usual, I'm going to say that this is not cardiovascular 101, but rather cardiovascular 0.001. This is the very, very basics, and it's not intended in any way to be a thorough explanation of cardiovascular, but rather just some of the basic concepts that would help you understand the principles behind this particular system. All right. So with that being said, let's go ahead and do a quick refresher in terms of our heart and right versus left and where it goes and where it comes back from and to and so on and so forth. Right. Let's take a picture and let's take a look at this picture that we have on our screen. This is our heart, right? And as you can see, one part of it is red, one part of it is blue. The part in blue represents the right side of the heart, whereas the one in red is the left side of the heart. It is represented in red because the left side of the heart will deal with oxygenated blood, clean blood, right? And that clean blood is going to be pumped out of the left ventricle out to the body, okay? So the left heart, specifically the left ventricle, will pump the blood out to your body for your body to use that oxygen and those nutrients and so on and so forth, right? It'll go from your heart to your kidneys, to your abdomen, to your muscle, to your liver, so on and so forth, right? And everyone would use that blood, that oxygen, those nutrients. And once they're done with that, the byproduct of those chemical reactions, in other words, the garbage that you're not going to use, you dump on the venous system and you bring it back. The venous system will bring it back to the right side of the heart, right? To the inferior and superior vena cava. It's going to come back to the right atrium, here represented in green, right? So this right atrium will receive this blood from the body and pump it to the right ventricle. The right ventricle, right, through the pulmonary arteries, is going to send it out to the lungs, right? Let's do a lung over here and a lung over here so you guys can understand it. So it comes back from the body through the inferior and superior vena cava. It goes into the right atrium. It goes into the right ventricle. The right ventricle sends it out to the lungs, and the lungs will breathe that oxygen in and clean the blood, reoxygenate that blood, right? Once that blood is reoxygenated, it's going to come back to the left. It's going to go from the lungs where it gets reoxygenated back to the left side of the heart, okay? And it's going to come here through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium, right? And this left atrium is going to pump it down to the ventricle, to the left ventricle, and the left ventricle will then again pump it out to the body. And so the cycle begins again and again and again. And what I want you to see is that, let me choose another color. Let me choose, well, I guess I don't have many colors, so let me go with black, right? I want you to see this here is anatomically incorrect, okay? I'm just doing it so you can see it better. What happens here is that instead of pumping it out this way, it pumps it through the aorta, okay? I'm just doing this over here so you guys can see it simpler, okay? So with that being said, it could technically be said that between the right heart and the left heart lay the lungs, right? Because the right heart is going to pump out to the lungs, and the lungs will bring it back to the left side. So with that being said, the lungs are technically in between the right and the left side of the heart, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does, right? So with that being said, let's go ahead and convert this picture to a much simpler diagram. Not that it's anatomically correct, but something that we can understand perhaps a little better, hopefully, right? So let's go ahead and say, let's go ahead and say that we have two hearts instead of just one, right? we're gonna have the right heart and the left heart, okay? And each one of them is gonna have two chambers. In this case, the right atria, the right ventricle, the left atria, and the left ventricle, okay? And in between them, the mighty lungs. Mighty lungs, right? So blood that is dirty and deoxygenated will come back from the body into the right atria, okay? So therefore, in the venous system, the blood is going to flow in this direction from the body to the heart. This right atria will receive this blood and then pump it out to the right ventricle. The right ventricle will fill with this dirty blood and send it to the lungs. Now, the lungs will breathe in, reoxygenate that blood, and now this oxygenated blood will go from the lungs to the left atria. This left atria will fill with this oxygenated blood that will go out to the ventricle or down to the ventricle. The ventricle will fill with this oxygenated blood and will pump it out to the body through the arterial system, right? The blue is the venous system, the red is the arterial system. And it's red because it is oxygenated, right? And the direction of the blood flowing here is away from the heart and to the body, whereas in the venous system is from the body back to the heart, away from the body and back to the heart. And in the arterial system on the left is going to be away from the heart out to the body. Okay, so with that being said, now that we understand this basic concept, we got to take a look at what are the symptomatology that we're going to find in these patients. If we either have failure on the right or failure on the left, we're going to have different symptomatology. Right? If your right fails, the blood that is supposed to be coming back to your heart, remember that you have this direction, right? Is coming back to the heart. But if your right fails, this blood will not be pumped appropriately forward to the lungs. And therefore, this blood is going to queue in back up. It's going to back up into the venous system and sit there and just wait until it's turn for this failing pump to pump it out to the lungs. Okay? In the case of the left, when the left fails, if the left fails to pump appropriately, that blood that's in here will not be pumped appropriately to the arterial system, so it will back up into your lungs, right? Because, you know, the blood was in the lungs to begin with, and it gets pumped out to the left side. But if the left side is failing, right, that blood is going to back up into the structure before it. What is the structure that comes before the left side? The lungs. What is the structure that comes before the right side? The venous system. Okay, so, and perhaps I should do this in blue, the venous system, right? It's what comes before the right. So if the right fails, blood is going to get stuck here in the venous system. If the left fails to pump forward, when I say fail, I mean fail to pump the blood forward, then the blood will back up into the lungs. So with that being said, with that basic knowledge, if we have a left-sided failure, right? And we're going to say that we have the lungs and the left atria and left ventricle. If this structure here fails to pump the blood forward and out to the body, then this blood is going to back up into the structure prior to the lungs. That means that this lung is going to get full of fluids, right? That blood is just going to be sitting there because it's not being moved forward. And if your lung is full of fluids, you're gonna have pulmonary congestion, right? Think about it, it's full of fluids, pulmonary congestions. And when that happens and you have fluid in your lungs, you're gonna hear crackles upon assessment. Okay, you may even hear an S3, right? Instead of S1 and S2, we're gonna hear an S3. This person is going to be DOE, or dyspnea on exertion, meaning you're going to be short of breath with any type of physical exertion. Immediately you're going to get short of breath because those lungs are full of fluid, right? If your lungs are full of fluids, then your oxygenation is going to be crappy. So oxygenation is going to come down. You can't really exchange oxygen and CO2 if the lung is full of fluids, right? You're going to have initially a non-productive cough, and the more that this lung gets filled with blood, the more productive that cough is going to be. Okay, and here is another very interesting fact, and I want you to think about this. Let's talk about perfusion. If this heart is failing on the left failure, if the left is failing, not only this blood is getting backed up on the lung, right? But also, if it's failing to pump, it's not moving the blood forward and out to the body. And therefore, those structures in the body, such as your kidneys, for example, that are waiting for that blood to use that oxygen to be able to function, they will eventually stop functioning or will start failing as well because there's no perfusion, there's no blood getting there. So for example, if you do not get blood to the kidney because the heart is failing and it's not pumping appropriately to get to the kidney, and the kidney is getting little blood and maybe not properly oxygenated and whatever, then that kidney is going to start to fail as well. And one of the things that you're going to see in that case is oliguria, right? If you don't have blood getting to the kidney, that kidney is not going to function properly. And the function of the kidney is to produce urine. So if you're not functioning properly, you're not going to properly produce urine, and therefore oliguria. But the main thing that I want you to take home from the left is that if the left fails, that blood will back up into the lungs. So all the presentations that you're going to see are primarily respiratory, right? Pulmonary congestion, crackles, shortness of breath, low oxygenation, so on and so forth. Okay, so now let's move on to the right side of the heart, right? We're going to have this simple schema, right? We're going to have the right atria, the right ventricle, and then the almighty lung, right? And if you remember the last picture or the last drawing that I did, the lung was prior to the heart, whereas in here, the heart is prior to the lung. Because remember, the blood comes from the venous system and enters the right atria from the body, goes to the right ventricle, and it goes to the lungs, right? So perhaps I should do something different. Perhaps let's do it backwards. Let's go ahead and do the lung over here, and then the right heart over here with its two chambers, right atria, right ventricle, right? And we said that we're gonna do the lung after the heart because the venous system is gonna bring blood back from the body to the heart, right? All of this blood flowing back to the heart. And it usually goes into, well, not usually, it does go to the right atria, down to the right ventricle, and from the right ventricle to the lungs. Okay, so if the right heart fails, and when I say fails to pump that blood forward, right? It's a weak heart and it's not pumping appropriately, so then it doesn't have the capacity to move the same amount of fluid appropriately, right? So the thing here is, remember, when something fails to pump forward, the structure that's going to suffer is the structure prior. So this lung here is not going to get full of fluids. That is not going to happen because that happens if the left fails, because the left will back up into the lung, but the right fails and it backs up into the venous system. Okay, And the venous system, what you're going to see in the venous system then is peripheral congestion, right? You're going to have jugular vein distension. You're going to have edema, hepatomegaly, ascites, weight gain, right? And eventually over time, when the right fails, eventually the left fails, and then everything goes down south. But I want you to see that in the case of the left, fluid will back up into the lungs and you get short of breath, low oxygenation, crackles, cough, so on and so forth. But in the case of the right, when the right fails, it goes back into the venous system and you're primarily going to see edema. Where are you going to see the edema? In the legs, in the abdomen, in the neck, wherever the venous system is, right? In the legs, we call it edema. If it is in the abdomen, in your liver, for example, we'll call that hepatomegaly. If it is all around your abdomen, we're going to call that ascites. And if you're retaining fluid and all this blood is backing up in this system, right? It's all backed up in here like high traffic because this heart is not pumping it forward, so it's backing up into the system. What we're going to have is a problem of fluid retention. So therefore, we're going to have weight gain, right? We're retaining fluids, we're going to weigh more, right? Do the math. Go ahead and weigh yourself right now, then drink a liter of water, and then step on that scale again, and you're going to see that difference, right? You're retaining those fluid weights, right? So you're going to see edema, weight gain, ascites, hepatomegaly, jugular vein distension, right? And if we have more fluids in our system, we're also going to have a little bit of hypertension as well, right? Because, the more volume you have, the more hypertension you're going to have. So with that being said, that's a very, very basic explanation as to the symptomatology that you're going to see in each one of these patients and why. Okay, it's a basic video. It's not intended to be thorough in any way, but just, kind of like a base for you to build on in further studying. Okay, so thank you guys for being here today. If you have any questions, any concerns, please drop a comment in the chat and let me know what you didn't like, or would like to see in the future. Thank you very much, and you guys have a nice day.